I'll have a...
Weakness exploit.
How original.
And with extra...
Agitator.
Daring today, aren't we?
But it doesn't need to be this way.
Hello, my fellow hunters. Now, don't get me wrong. When it comes to Monster Hunter, my favorite thing in the entire series is the nature and the ecology and the detailed world. But my second favorite thing, and it's very close, is theory, crafting, builds math, and all of that deliciousness. I can't get enough. It's a problem. But as much as I like to min-max that damage, I do also very much like the side grade, the meme build, the alternate playstyle, most of which, most of the time, are only a few % behind, you know, your regular meta, and offer a really fun way to engage with the monsters. I mean, you're still mostly stabbing it to death, but you're doing it creatively. And I think in a world with this armor weapon skill split, while there are definitely advantages, I think it has also resulted in a bit of homogeneousness between the armor, because we're basically wanting affinity and then with your slots left raw. Obviously, weapon by weapon, it can all differ, but the weakness exploit, your agitator, your maximum might, your counter-strike, there is a core that is always sought after. Looking at you, magala. In any case, it kind of leaves a lot of the other skills sort of in the dust. If you go up to Smithy and have a little armor crafty looky and have a look at equipment skills, there is 6 pages of lovely options. And look, what I'm going to get into really isn't exactly unique to Wilds. Every Monster Hunter has a ridiculous amount of skills, and most of them, most of the time, tend not to be used. That's sort of fine. It's unavoidable in just games in general, because you want to use what works for what you want to do, which most of the time is efficiency, damage, boom, boom. But it is a little bit of a shame, and this applies to set bonuses too, where they're just not kind of cutting the mustard. And I think Flayer is a good example because it's a new skill, it's really fun, it's just kind of not strong enough to really use anywhere for any kind of real reason. And I wanted then today to take a little bit of time to go over 5 skills or set bonuses I think could really do with being buffed, now that we know that technically they are opening to buffing skills. Maximum Might got a cataclysmic buff, which changed a lot, especially for Greatsword. And even aforementioned Flayer and Convert Element got a buff in that more weapon attacks can actually trigger it, making it much more useful. So let's sort of get into this then. Starting with, yes, Flayer. It's a really, really entertaining skill and was by far my favorite to use back in early access before the game came out, before we had proper data on how everything truly worked. Because on paper, it sounds great. You get more wounds, you make them faster, you explode for damage. What's not to love in a wound-based system? But when you have limits on what attacks can trigger it, you have a limited number of wounds per hunt. Flayer just makes you get through them faster. It's essentially like Heartbreaker, but for wounds, i.e. you do more damage wound-wise, but not more damage total to the monster. The actual damage amount that it procs for and frequency isn't going to compete with level 5 of the properly good skills, and you just start to see more and more disadvantages. I would love this to just be tuned up a little bit, just given a little bit more numberage, increase the proc frequency, the damage, the wound speed just a little bit. And as we do know, they are going to give monsters a little bit more wound resistance, as that is one thing that makes the game perhaps a tad easy. I think you could accompany that with Flayer. Imagine if current wound rate was the post-wound change rate with Flayer 5, and if you didn't use it, it became a lot harder to get and abuse wounds. That would be a kind of nice little balance. I don't want to go too in-depth on this one, because I think it's very much self-explanatory of, hey, Flayer's a cool new fun skill that interacts with a cool new fun mechanic, please be stronger, because normally things that fall into that category do tend to be strong to actually encourage their use. Next up then is Foray. I really like Foray as a skill. Get a bunch of raw, a bunch of affinity for hitting poison and paralysis. The paralysis part doesn't really help because paralysis is such a tiny percent of your hunt time-wise that it's nice that it's there, but it's not really playstyle build-aroundy encouraging. The paralysis part should be you gain this attack and affinity for X seconds after hitting a paralyzed monster, like a, reward for triggering that status for a little bit. Kind of like your convert element, your latent power, you get that little buff, or your coalescence, or even overcoming the frenzy with antivirus, like 90 seconds or so of this when you hit paralysis. That gives it much more parity with something like agitator that makes it a lot more attractive as a status rewarding skill. Now, I'm not thinking Wilds needs more encouragement to go non-element, but at least convert element getting a level 2 talisman, and we're seeing strong convert element runs against Xoxia, has given element a little bit of a boost in the title update, but overall, let's be honest, element isn't exactly shining, but still, poison is where it's at, because I really like playing with poison as a status. I think it's a lot of fun, seeing that constant purple dribble as the monster ticks away and away and away, that consistent curve of damage. The fact that you can build poison while the monster is poisoned is a way to encourage this, because in theory it's possible to have permanent Foray. In practice it's not, because only Shiwu has enough weakness to poison to let you do that with good poison application, but I would like to see that explored more. We had an era in Sunbreak where Foray was an actual meta skill, and that's the thing, and something I kind of want to talk about, and bringing up Convert Element is similar. A lot of the times when I talk about these skills, they don't need direct buffs to the literal skill. I'm not saying Foray needs an increase in its attack or its affinity percent necessarily. Sometimes you can buff a skill by just giving it better supporting gear to let you acquire it in more efficient ways, or better supporting poison paralysis to make it again more reliably on, or indeed more relevant monsters that are weak to poison. The game can change around the skill and suddenly push the skill into the spotlight, and that does happen a lot over title updates, and that's something that I would really like to see with Foray again, as I think Foray status builds are one of the really enjoyable ways to hunt monsters. Foray to me always strikes me as a skill that should be on terms with Agitator. It's the same numbers just flipped, and if we're looking at poison against a poison weak enemy, pretty much the same sort of uptime. Just the supporting gear for it right now just doesn't make it worthwhile, coupled with that lack of real killer endgame poison enemy. So I hope some title updates do give us that Foray front and center. Next one then, and a little bit of a quicker one, is Mizutsune's prowess or bubbly dance. This is a little bit of a shame. Now, granted, the game clearly considers Mizutsune as a tier of monster below sort of gore magala. Its armor is rare 6, even with the 8-star tempered, and I think that's a shame because it means that bubbly dance essentially is just sort of worse frenzy when coupled with its weapon. You can wear 2 pieces of gore for universal 25% affinity on any build. You wear 2 pieces of bubbly dance and you can't get major bubble blighted when hunting specifically Mizutsune. Oh. And even if 2-set enabled Mizutsune weapons, which it doesn't, it still would be, maybe. But the fact that you need all 4 pieces to self-inflict Bubble Blight to then power Slicked Blade is really kind of anticlimactic. There's a few niche fun situations, and honestly, this one of everything I'm talking about is probably the closest to, hey, put on 4 pieces of Mizutsune, use a Slicked Blade weapon, have a fun little meme build, bubble dancing, that's all well and good. You won't be that much slower with current hunt difficulty. Have a good time, And that's sort of fine. My main real thing here is just make the 2-set give yourself Bubble Blight. It still wouldn't be better than something like Gore 2-set because it's tied to the weapons, but it would be a lot more approachable and a lot more on parity. That's something that I think was perhaps a miss here, and then Bubbly Dance 2 could have really enhanced it in a way that gives you something properly good for full committing to Mizutsune. I think this one more than anything just comes as a little bit of an anticlimax because it was a title update monster, monster, and I think it's worth mentioning. And it's also literally broken, or at least something's not working correctly. If you are wet, then you get the extra 9% affinity for being so, but Bubble Blight itself doesn't count you as wet, but it does count you as wet for the food skill that gives you attack when wet, so one of those isn't doing what it should. Having Bubble Blight should count as wet, just to give that little bit of a boost to Slicked Blade. After that then, the final two, and probably the two that I'm most sad about, is a sort of combination, and that's why I'm talking about them as a pair instead of just one by one. The first of which is peak performance. This feels criminally undertuned, and this is one where I think the numbers just don't make sense. Level 1, +3 attack. That's just kinda really pathetic. Now, in fairness, it is a level 2 decoration, not a level 3 decoration. So it does have to sort of be compared to equivalent level 2 slots. So, you know, it's got to go up against things like, oh, I don't know, the best offensive skill in the game for weapons that can use it, 25 raw for a level 3 slot permanently up because you can trigger it with hyper armor attacks. Even level 5 peak performance and you have to be on max health is still 5 less raw than Counter-Strike for 3 slots? Oh, okay, but maximum might, oh, I don't know, 30% affinity permanently for the most part, especially with the buffs, not on every weapon of course, but there's a reason that you see these two in essentially every build. And then peak performance is over here like, I'm trying my best, oh my god, please just be perfect, don't take any damage and I'll give you some raw. How much raw? Just some. And I really think the reward for being literally perfect should be more than 20 raw for 5 2 slots worth of skill. You look at something like Heroics, which is also 5 2 slots worth of skill, but there you're getting an actual meaty percent-based attack increase. And you still have to be perfect with Heroics, you play on low health so you can't get hit. With peak performance you can't get hit, but if you do get hit you just lose the buff, you don't, die like with Heroics, so okay, it should be a little bit weaker than Heroics, but the gap is gargantuan. And I would love to see peak performance reward, well, peak performance just a little bit better. I think there is a lot of potential to playing on full health as a playstyle, building in self-healing, getting your flayer and your wounding and then your arkveld set bonuses to heal on attack and get back to full, activate big damage, and I think peak performance should have a little bit of a grace period. It should drop X amount of seconds after losing full health, kind of like maximum might from losing stamina. Maybe 5-10 seconds, to give you time to reapply it. That could create some fun up and down juggling of the skill. But it just doesn't happen. It's a real shame. And the reason I bring it up especially is because even something like Zoshia having permanent passive healing would be a nice way to, without changing peak performance itself, suddenly perhaps make it more viable, as that might be a nice way to build in that self-healing to keep its uptime. But even if you kept its uptime, right, even if peak performance was literally no condition plus 20 raw attack for 5 2 slots worth of skills, if that's simply what it was, 20 raw, there you go, nothing else required, you would still do this after maximum might and after Counter-Strike. So the fact that you get this bonus but you need to be at full health really shows you the kind of level of power this skill doesn't have. So I would really like it to be the proper Heroics of full health, maybe even have it be percentage based and encourage some self-healing, tanky playstyles like hiding behind a lance shield or sword and shield, constantly perfect guarding, taking chip damage, but easily healing it to keep that peak performance up and having that be worth it. And the reason I'm wearing full Gravios here, outside of it giving peak performance, is Gravios as an armor set, it's clearly designed around peak performance. The monster is encased in rock, you know, until you crack that carapace, he has peak performance. That's the theme, and that's really nice. But we then go to number 1 here, which is Gravios' protection, his 2 and 4 set. Reduce the damage you take by 10% when your health is full. What is this? I was so excited when I first saw this because of the immortal build and oh, if we can keep healing to full and then we take less damage, but 10%? It's just so anticlimactic. If I get this training dummy on big smack mode and we're all nice and on full health and we get this big 10% damage reduction, whoo! There we go! Bye-bye peak performance, but hey, we'll heal up to full real quick. Yeah, it's just so... and it's full of potential because it really is a fun idea. Take less damage when you're on full health, but I think the implementation is a bit safe. I assume they didn't want it to be too good because it could become quite a ridiculous playstyle if it really was that helpful at not taking damage. But I think there is 2 better ways to do this Gravios, set bonus that could work into a better peak performance that would also be really fun. I think it should either A, the first instance of damage you take, whether it's 1 or a billion, at full health is negated, and then the set bonus goes down for a cooldown, 30 seconds, etc. And then the next time you take damage, you take it as normal, and then when you heal back to full, or the cooldown is done, it reinstates. So it basically gives you 1 free hit per time you're on full health to buy you an almost life for peak performance. That would be really fun and also mimic, you know, Gravios' carapace and how that works. The other one, and this one might be a bit too strong, but I think it would be really, really fun, is if the damage that you would take from an attack is less than 10% of your health, then you don't take it. So all you shield users could take your chip damage with 2 4-set Gravios, but actually then not take any damage because it's less than 10% of your health. That would be really fun. A set bonus that means you at the minimum need to take 11% damage or more to actually take damage. And it's tied to a set that's not very good. So it wouldn't exactly be any kind of ridiculous game breaking, I don't think. You'd have the peak performance, you'd have that little threshold, and you could play a proper healy, tanky, hermit-esque style with peak performance in a better state, with Gravios set in a better state. And that's why they form my second and first place. I think that would be really cool, and look, if you're gonna have to look like this, sorry Gravios, the chest is quite cool to be fair, then you at least should be rewarded for it. But hey, that's just my thoughts, that's my ideas. Which skills would you guys like to see tuned up, whether themselves or via something else around it changing or being added, and how would you do it? I would love to know, but for now, like you've enjoyed this, subscribe and hit the bell for more. Consider supporting the future channel on Patreon down below. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.